people approached me with a view to doing a spec film script, or maybe to write some episodes of The Bill. It was clear that writing a book a year was not going to keep the wolf from the door, so by this time I'd found a full-time job on a magazine called Hi-Fi Review. Watchman was failing to find a publisher in the USA, while my new editor at Bodley Head was hinting fairly heavily that I'd soon be needing to seek a new UK publisher too. I'd finished another novel, West Wind, but no one was buying that either. Things seemed desperate indeed. I had a full-time job that entailed 3 hours of commuting a day. I was reviewing 1 or 2 books a week for Scotland on Sunday newspaper, and somewhere in the margins I was trying to write. My partner, meantime, was attempting to move us to France, but she wouldn't manage that for another 18 months or so, and before then I'd have started work on the long-deferred Rebus II. I changed Watcher to Watchman after discovering Alan Moore's graphic novel, Watchmen. I'm guessing that Miles Flint took his surname from the character in the spoof 1960s spy films In Like Flint and Our Man Flint. Rereading the book recently, I was struck by how fast it moves, cutting quickly from one scene to another, its elliptical, breathless style marking it as a young man's work, a story by someone in thrall to the possibilities of narrative. Strange, too, that it should be such a period piece. Almost no one owns a mobile phone, and Miles doesn't even own a computer. I was pleased to see so many in-jokes along the way. There's an oblique reference to the events of Noughts and Crosses, and Jim Stevens, the journalist from that book, reappears. There's a pub called The Tilting Room, actually a collection of stories by my friend Ron Butlin, and a gay club called The Last Peacock, title of an Alan Massey novel. There's also a character called the Organ Grinder, whom we'd see again in a later Rebus novel, The Black Book. And Miles's son is called Jack. I'd forgotten that, though my own son, born 4 years after the publication of Watchmen, has the same name. As to the book's dedicatee, well, he went on to win a lot of money on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Funny old world, isn't it? Ian Rankin, Edinburgh, 2003. For Alistair. Prologue. It was said that his ancestors had come from Donegal, and for that reason, if no other, he had decided to spend a holiday in Ireland. The lush countryside, so quiet after London, and the little villages around the coast delighted him, and the people were polite, and, he supposed, as friendly as they would ever be to an Englishman. But he was quick to point out to them that his roots were in Donegal, that in spirit, if not in body, he was as they were, a blood-hot Celt. Having spent long enough in the west, he travelled east, driving through Fermanagh and Monaghan, until he reached the coast, just south of Dundalk. The days were balmy and clear, and he breathed it all in, resisting the occasional temptation to telephone back to London with news of his trip. He could wait for all that. A few of the men along the coast were fishermen, but not many, not now that the economy was dragging itself, along with the country's social problems, into the 20th century. The north was a ferment of naive idealism and brutish anger, the whole concoction spiked by foreign meddling of the most malign nature. In particular, there was one young man, his hair wild and with a beard to match, whom he met in Drogheda, and who had spoken to him of the fishing industry and the village pubs and of politics. Politics seemed to pervade life in Ireland as though the very air carried whispered reminders of bloodshed and injustice. He had listened with an unjaundiced ear, explaining in his turn that he was on holiday, but that really he was recovering from a broken heart. The young man nodded, seeming to understand, his eyes keen like a gull's. In one of the pubs they sat for night after night, though he could feel, through his happiness, the end of the holiday approaching. They drove into the countryside one day, so that the young man, Will, could spend some time away from the gutting of fish and the rank posturing of the boats. They ate and drank, and, with Will's directions, approached a quayside as dusk was falling. He pointed over to a small